I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to show up at a nude beach, let alone get caught off guard by the situation in the parking lot before I even made it to the sand. Honestly, I was just trying to have a chill weekend away from the city, something completely different, and maybe, just maybe, get a fresh start on the whole dating thing that had been feeling more like a mess than anything else. So there I was, driving along this quiet coastal road, the salty breeze sneaking through my cracked window, the sun warming my face, and a playlist of indie folk buzzing softly through the speakers. I'd read about this little-known nude beach a friend mentioned, secluded, peaceful, the kind of place where nobody cared about your history, your job, your past relationships. Perfect. I figured I'd go, soak up the sun, maybe strike up a casual conversation with someone, but definitely not anything major. At least, that was the plan. Pulling into the parking lot, I noticed something immediately off. The lot was almost empty except for one car, parked way on the far side, near the dunes. I thought it was weird, but hey, maybe the guy wanted some extra privacy. I parked the Jeep a few spots away, grabbed my towel and bag, and started walking toward the beach entrance. Here's the part that got me. As I was passing by that lone car, a guy stepped out. Tall, lean, with this messy dark hair that looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. He wasn't wearing a thing. Not a stitch. Just confidently strolling around like it was the most normal thing in the world. My brain basically short-circuited for a second because, well, I wasn't expecting to be the only other guy in the entire parking lot, and the fact he was completely nude made it all feel more surreal. He caught me staring, grinned, and said, "First time?" I laughed nervously. "Yeah, you could say that." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant and introduced himself as Mark. There was something easy about his vibe, relaxed, but not in a sloppy way. More like someone who'd spent a lot of time figuring out who he was and wasn't apologizing for it. "What brings you here?" he asked, flicking his gaze toward the dunes leading to the beach. I shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed. Honestly, needed a break from everything. Thought I'd try something new. Plus, figured if I was going to mess up my first nude beach experience, might as well do it with some company. Mark laughed, this genuine low sound that made me feel a little lighter. "Well, you've got me. You're not alone." That moment standing there in the middle of the lot, the sun beating down, the ocean not far off, it was weirdly comforting. Like, here was this stranger, completely open and unapologetic, and somehow that made me feel like maybe I could be the same. We started walking toward the beach together, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so unguarded in front of anyone, let alone another guy. The kind of unguarded that wasn't about vulnerability or stress, but just being. Just existing without all the usual armor. And honestly, I had no idea how much that moment in the parking lot would change everything. But something told me that day was going to be a lot less about the beach itself, and a lot more about the person walking beside me. We kept walking side by side, the sand crunching under our feet, the dunes waving gently in the breeze. The beach was everything I'd hoped for. Quiet, open, with just the sound of waves and the occasional gull overhead. Mark didn't seem to mind that I was awkward about the whole undress thing. He just chatted like it was no big deal, like this was his everyday life, which made me relax a little more. "So what do you do when you're not, confidently walking nude through random parking lots?" he asked with a smirk. I chuckled, feeling the heat rise to my face more from nerves than the sun. "I'm a graphic designer, mostly stuck behind a screen, designing logos and websites. It's not exactly adventurous, but it pays the bills." He nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon for a moment. "I'm a teacher, high school English. Nothing glamorous, but I love it. It's rewarding, even if it's exhausting." "Teaching, huh? That makes sense. You seem like the kind of guy who'd be good at that. Patient, easy to talk to." He shrugged, smiling softly. "I try. What about you? You said you needed a break from everything. What's the story there?" I hesitated, then figured, why not? It felt like a safe space, weird as it was. Honestly, I'd been in this relationship that just wasn't working. We tried to make it work, but it got to the point where I felt like I was losing myself. So I broke it off, and, well, here I am, trying to figure out what comes next. Mark nodded with understanding. Good for you. Sometimes you have to shake things up to find out who you really are. We found a spot a little away from the few other people scattered along the shore. Mark took off his towel and sat down on the sand before patting the spot next to him. I was still nervous, but I dropped my things and sat anyway. The sun felt incredible on my skin. I realized I'd never actually spent much time just being outside like this. No distractions, no layers between me and the world. It was freeing, but also kinda scary. Mark caught my glance and grinned. It's weird the first time, right? But you get used to it fast. Yeah, I think I'm still trying to convince my brain not to panic every time I see someone walking around. We laughed, and the tension between us started to ease. We talked about everything and nothing. Favorite books, bad movies, childhood memories. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a long time, like Mark just had this way of making things feel simple and honest. At one point, he reached over and brushed some sand off my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but I felt a spark, this unexpected warmth spreading through me. I glanced at him, and his eyes caught mine for a moment longer than I expected. It wasn't just friendliness there. "Mark," I said quietly, "do you come here often?" He laughed, a little sheepishly. "Yeah, I guess you could say that. It's my favorite spot to clear my head, especially when life gets messy." I nodded, understanding completely. "Maybe I need to make this my spot too." He smiled, and there was a pause that felt full of possibilities. Just then, a seagull squawked overhead, and we both looked up, breaking the moment. I realized how much time had passed, how comfortable I felt sitting next to this stranger who just happened to be the only other guy in the Nude beach parking lot. As the afternoon sun started to dip lower, casting long shadows on the sand, Mark stood and offered me his hand. "Come on, let's go for a swim." I hesitated, nervous about the whole undress swimming thing, but the invitation felt genuine. I took his hand, and we walked toward the water. The ocean was cool and refreshing, and as we waded in, I felt all that tension I'd been carrying just wash away. We swam and floated, side by side, occasionally bumping into each other, laughing when the waves knocked us around. At some point, Mark reached out and grabbed my hand, intertwining our fingers. My heart was pounding, but it felt right, natural. When we finally climbed out and sat wrapped in towels, I realized something important. I wasn't just at the beach to escape my past. I was here because maybe, just maybe, I was ready to start something new. And who knew? It all started with a guy who was the only other one in the Nude beach parking lot. We sat there on the beach, our towels wrapped tight around us, drying slowly as the sun began its slow descent. The sky was turning those warm shades of orange and pink that always make you feel like the world is holding its breath for a moment, just for you. I could still feel Mark's hand in mine, fingers laced loosely but firmly enough to remind me he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Honestly, it was the kind of simple connection I didn't realize I'd been craving. "So," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what's the plan after this? Are you just gonna head back to the city and pretend this didn't happen?" I laughed, but there was a flicker of something serious behind it. Tempting as that sounds. I think I might try to enjoy the moment for once. Besides, it's not every day you meet a guy who's confident enough to be the only one undressed in a parking lot. Mark smirked. "I was gonna say, you're pretty brave yourself for showing up here." Brave? More like clueless, I admitted. It's a whole new world for me. He nudged me gently with his shoulder. "Well, if you want, I can be your guide. There are lots of secrets this beach holds." His eyes twinkled mischievously. I felt a warmth spread through me, not just from the sun, but from whatever it was that made me want to trust him. I'd like that. We sat there for a while longer, just talking, until the chill of the evening started creeping in, and we reluctantly gathered up our things. On the walk back to the parking lot, Mark kept the mood light, teasing me about how red my sunburn was already becoming, and how I should probably get better at relaxing if I was going to stick with the whole nude beach thing. When we got to the lot, that same quiet vibe hung in the air, but it felt different now, warmer, less awkward. I looked over at Mark's car, the one that had seemed so lonely when I arrived. He unlocked it and leaned against the hood casually. So he said, "You want to grab a bite? There's a little diner a couple miles from here. It's nothing fancy, but the pie's amazing." I hesitated, the impulse to say no because I didn't want to rush into anything warred with the part of me that actually wanted to keep this night going. I glanced at him, the way the street lamp caught the outline of his face, how his smile seemed genuine, and suddenly it wasn't such a hard choice. Yeah, let's do it. The diner was the kind of place with red vinyl booths, neon signs humming softly, and the smell of coffee and fries in the air. We slid into a booth by the window, both still drying off from the swim, wrapped in casual clothes but somehow feeling like the only two people in the universe. Over greasy burgers and those infamous pies, the conversation deepened. We talked about our families, our fears, the things we didn't usually admit out loud. Mark shared stories about his students, who kept him grounded and sometimes frustrated, and I told him about the relationship that had ended and how it made me question what I really wanted. At one point, I caught him staring at me, this softness in his eyes that made my stomach flip. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or something more, but I found myself leaning in a little, closing some of the distance between us. "Thanks for tonight," I said quietly, "for making this feel easy." He smiled, that same genuine smile I'd seen earlier, the one that made me want to believe in good things again. "I'm glad you came. I was hoping you would." After dinner, we found ourselves back in the parking lot, and for a moment, neither of us wanted the night to end. The street was quiet, the breeze cooler now, but I didn't want to let go of the connection we'd started. Without thinking too much, I reached for his hand again, and this time, he didn't hesitate to pull me closer. Our faces were just inches apart, and I could see the way his eyes darkened, with something that felt like hope, and maybe a little bit of nervousness. "I don't usually do this," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," he said, his breath warm against my cheek. Then, slowly, he kissed me. Soft at first, testing the waters, before the kiss deepened and I felt like everything, the past, the regrets, the loneliness, just melted away in that moment. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, I realized that this wasn't just about a nude beach or a random meeting in a parking lot anymore. It was something real, something I didn't want to let go of. "Can we do this again?" I asked, hopeful. Mark smiled, the kind of smile that makes you believe in second chances. "Yeah, I think we can." After that night, things between Mark and me didn't exactly explode into some whirlwind romance. Instead, it felt more like a steady, slow burn. And honestly, that was kind of refreshing. The next morning, I woke up with the sunlight streaming through my window, the memory of the kiss still warm on my lips, and a little nervous excitement fluttering in my chest. We had exchanged numbers before parting ways at the diner, and by midday, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Beach round 2, this time with sunscreen and less sunburn potential." I smiled, typing back, "Deal. But only if you promise not to laugh at my lobster complexion." The second visit to the beach was easier, more relaxed. Mark showed up right on time, wearing those worn-in shorts and a loose button-up that looked like it had been through a few adventures itself. He smiled when he saw me, and I realized I was already looking forward to spending time with him again, even if it was just walking around without any clothes on in front of strangers. We settled into a routine. Coffee at the same diner, long talks about everything from favorite music to what we wanted out of life. Mark was patient, and I was beginning to see how rare that was. He didn't push, didn't try to rush me into anything I wasn't ready for. Instead, he just listened and shared pieces of himself, little by little. One afternoon, we ended up sprawled out on the sand, the ocean stretching endlessly behind us. I was watching the waves when he spoke up quietly. "Have you ever thought about just leaving it all behind? The city, the noise, the constant rush?" I thought about it. The job that pleased me hours from my day. The apartment that felt more like a storage unit than a home. The relationships that never seemed to stick. It was tempting. More than once, I admitted. Mark turned toward me, his expression serious. Maybe this is the place for that. Not just the beach, but this whole quiet, slowed down life. I don't mean forever, but sometimes you just need a reset. I nodded, the idea taking root in my mind. I like that. A reset sounds perfect, right about now. We sat in silence for a bit, the kind of comfortable quiet that doesn't feel awkward. Then, out of nowhere, Mark reached over and grabbed my hand again. It was like a silent promise. No matter what happened, we'd face it together. A few weeks passed, and our connection only grew stronger. We explored nearby trails, grabbed late-night tacos, and even binge-watched terrible sci-fi movies that made us laugh until our sides hurt. Each day felt like a page in a story I didn't want to end. One evening, as we were packing up our stuff after a long day at the beach, Mark paused and looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart skip. "Hey," he said, "can I be honest about something?" "Always." He took a deep breath. "I've been through my share of complicated relationships, things that didn't work out, people who weren't ready. And sometimes, I worry about starting over again." I squeezed his hand gently. "I get that. I've been there too." He smiled, a little weary but hopeful. "But with you, it feels different, like maybe we don't have to carry all those old bags around." I returned the smile, the weight in my chest lifting. "Yeah, I feel it too." The night grew darker, the stars coming out like tiny pinpricks in the sky. We stayed there, side by side, the ocean whispering secrets just for us. A couple of days later, I found myself standing outside Mark's apartment for the first time. Invitation in hand, with a note that simply said, "Come in. Coffee's ready." I knocked, and when he opened the door, I felt that same mix of nerves and something like home. Inside, the place was cozy, filled with books and little touches that spoke of Mark's personality. He poured coffee for both of us, and we settled onto the couch, the afternoon light casting warm patterns across the room. We talked about dreams and fears, hopes for the future, and the messiness of the past. I realized I was starting to imagine a future that included him, something I hadn't allowed myself to do in a long time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in golden hues, Mark reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. "I'm glad you showed up that day," he whispered. "Me too," I replied, my voice barely audible. In that moment, it wasn't just about the nude beach or the chance meeting anymore. It was about two people who found something unexpected in a quiet place, something worth holding on to. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew I was ready to see where this story would take us next. A few days later, Mark invited me to a small gathering at his place, a few friends from work, and some locals he'd met through the beach community. I'll admit, I was a little nervous about stepping into his world outside of our bubble. I'm not exactly the party type, and meeting new people tends to make me clench up. But Mark's confident smile and the way he squeezed my hand as we walked in gave me a boost of courage. The apartment was buzzing with low conversations and laughter when we arrived. I recognized a few faces from the beach, and everyone seemed so at ease, like this was their second home. Mark quickly introduced me to a couple of his friends, Leah, a witty art teacher with a contagious laugh, and Jonas, a soft-spoken guy who worked at a local bookstore. "How long have you two been, hanging out?" Leah asked, grinning at us like she already knew there was something. Mark shrugged with a smirk. "Not too long, but it's been good, real good." I felt my cheeks warm, and Mark gave my hand a little squeeze under the table. It was nice, having someone on my side in a room full of strangers. As the night went on, the conversation drifted from casual stories to deeper talks about life changes and the kind of risks worth taking. At one point, I found myself opening up about the breakup that had nearly drained me. I thought I'd never get past the bitterness, I admitted quietly, but being here, with Mark, it feels like maybe I can really start fresh. Jonas nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes the best things come when you least expect them, like finding the right person on a nude beach parking lot." We all laughed at that, the absurdity of it making the moment feel even more real. Later, when the crowd started thinning, Mark and I found ourselves standing on his balcony, the cool night air wrapping around us. The town lights twinkled below, and the ocean whispered not far off. "Thanks for coming," Mark said softly, his hand finding mine again. "I know this isn't really your scene." I shook my head. "It's more than okay. It's nice, seeing you with your people, knowing you're part of something." He smiled, a little vulnerable this time. "And I want you to be part of it too. No pressure, but if you want." I looked at him, really looked, and felt a steady confidence grow inside me. I want that. The weeks that followed were probably some of the best I've had in a long time. Mark and I kept building on what we started. Lazy mornings with coffee and bad TV, spontaneous road trips to nearby towns, even the occasional awkward but hilarious cooking disaster in his tiny kitchen. One afternoon, after a long hike through a wooded trail that ended in a hidden cliff overlooking the ocean, we sat side by side, catching our breath and watching the waves crash below. "You ever think about what comes next?" I asked, fiddling with a loose thread on my shirt. He looked out over the water, his expression thoughtful. "I used to think about it all the time, and it scared me. But now, I don't want to rush it. I just want to see where this goes, day by day." I nodded. "Same here." There was a sweetness in the way he reached out and pulled me close, the comfort of being with someone who understood that life wasn't always about big gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it was just two people, sitting quietly, feeling like everything was exactly where it should be. But, of course, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. One evening, as we were winding down after a dinner of takeout and a movie, Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his smile fading just a bit. I caught the name on the screen, Mr. Daniels. "Work stuff?" I asked gently. Mark sighed. "Yeah. There's this project I've been working on. Kind of a big deal for the school. Today, I found out they might be cutting the funding. If that happens, it means layoffs." My stomach tightened. "That would be rough." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I love that job. It's more than just a paycheck. It's a community. And if I lose it, I don't know what comes next." I reached out, cupping his face in my hands. "Hey, whatever happens, you're not alone. We'll figure it out." He smiled then, a real, grateful smile that made me feel like maybe I was doing something right. The uncertainty hung between us, but it also brought us closer. We started talking more seriously about plans, about jobs, about where we wanted to live, about building something stable together. One night, after a long talk that stretched into the early hours, Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn key. "It's to a little cabin my family owns, about an hour from here. No power, no internet, but it's quiet, peaceful. I thought maybe we could go there this weekend. Just us, no distractions." I looked at the key, then back at him. "Sounds perfect." As I lay in bed that night, the key warm in my palm, I realized how much had changed in a few short weeks. From that awkward moment in the parking lot to now, I was starting to believe in new beginnings again. And maybe, just maybe, with Mark beside me, I could finally stop running from the past and start building something real. The weekend at the cabin was exactly what I didn't know I needed. When Mark handed me that little rusty key, I felt a weird mix of excitement and nerves, as if I was unlocking not just a door but a whole new chapter. The drive out there was quiet, the kind of silence that lets your brain slow down and notice the small stuff. The way the trees sway, the distant call of birds, the crunch of gravel under the tires. When we pulled up, the cabin was more charming than I expected. Weathered wood siding, a stone chimney, and a tiny porch with 2 rocking chairs that creaked under weight. No fancy amenities, just the basics, but that was the point. No distractions, no noise, just us and the land. Mark unlocked the door and swung it open, the cool, pine-scented air rushing out like a breath held too long. We stepped inside, and I immediately felt the cozy vibe. The rough wooden floors, a simple fireplace, a few shelves lined with dusty books and old photographs. "This place is magic," I said, dropping my bag by the door. Mark grinned. "It's my escape. When the world gets too loud, I come here." We spent the first few hours exploring the surrounding woods, the afternoon sun filtering through the branches, painting everything gold. I kept stealing glances at him, how he moved so naturally, the way his eyes lit up when he found some cool moss or pointed out a bird's nest. When we returned, we built a small fire in the stone fireplace. Mark showed me how to stack the wood just right, how to coax the flame to life. We sat close, the warmth chasing away the chill creeping in as the sun dipped below the horizon. "So," Mark said, poking at the fire with a stick, "what do you think? Could you live out here? No internet? Limited phone signal? Just nature and quiet?" I thought about my noisy city apartment, the endless distractions, and the exhaustion that came with it. "Honestly, I think I could," he smiled, turning to look at me. "Good, because I'm thinking about staying here more. Maybe even for good." There it was, a real conversation about a future neither of us had dared to say out loud before. The night stretched on, and we talked late into the evening. We shared stories about our childhoods, the things that shaped us, the hopes we kept hidden. I told him about my parents, divorce, and how it made me afraid of commitment, and he shared his own scars, past relationships gone wrong, the fear of being vulnerable again. But amidst the confessions, there was laughter too. Like when Mark tried to make coffee on a tiny camping stove and nearly set the cabin curtains on fire, or when I admitted I had no idea how to start a fire without a lighter. Those little moments, full of imperfections and honesty, made me feel closer to him than I ever expected. The next morning, we woke to birdsong and the soft glow of dawn filtering through the windows. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, while Mark brewed coffee over the stove. We ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the mist rise from the nearby creek. After breakfast, we decided to hike up a nearby hill Mark said had the best view for miles. The climb was tougher than I expected, but Mark was patient, encouraging me when I wanted to stop. At the top, we stood side by side, the world opening up beneath us, rolling hills, patchwork fields, and the distant glimmer of the ocean. Mark slipped his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him without hesitation. "This," he said softly, "this is why I come here. This peace." I turned and saw Mark asleep beside me, the soft rise and fall of his chest, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone in this anymore. We stayed there for a while, wrapped in blankets, just enjoying the slow, easy silence between us. No need for words. It felt like everything we'd been searching for was right there in that moment. Trust, comfort, and the kind of hope that doesn't demand perfection. On the drive back to town, the world felt different, more open somehow. We talked less about the past and more about the future, not in some big, dramatic way, but in the small, meaningful details. Where we might spend the holidays, what kind of plants to get for the apartment, the books we wanted to read together. Over the following weeks, life kept moving, but with a new rhythm. I went back to my graphic design job, but the exhaustion wasn't as heavy. I found myself looking forward to evenings with Mark, to our easy conversations and the way he made me laugh when I least expected it. He threw himself into his teaching with renewed energy, even in the face of that looming job uncertainty, and we talked openly about what might come next without letting fear take over. One evening, as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of peach and lavender, Mark reached over and took my hand. He said, "I never thought a chance meeting in a parking lot would change my life." I smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "Me neither, but I'm glad it did." He turned to look at me, eyes warm and steady. "I don't have all the answers yet, but I know I want to figure it out with you." And in that quiet, unassuming moment, I felt everything fall into place. No grand declarations or sweeping promises, just two people choosing each other, day by day. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought back to the nervous guy walking into that nude beach parking lot, unsure what he was looking for. Now, I wasn't searching anymore. I'd found something real, a connection that felt like home, and whatever the future held, I was ready to face it, hand in hand with Mark.